A woman with a history of deadly drunk driving will spend the next 67 years behind bars, this time for a crash.
On the night of January 29, 2021, a series of decisions, both personal and institutional, set into motion a tragedy that would leave Florida reeling.
Jennifer Carvajal was behind the wheel during a shocking crash. It was caught on camera while still on probation for another deadly crash nearly 7 years earlier.
Jennifer Carvajal, just 24 years old, was driving south on I-275 outside of Tampa. Her vehicle, a Ford Fusion, veered off the road at high speed. The car flipped multiple times before slamming into a guardrail and rolling to a stop. When first responders arrived, they found Jennifer standing nearby, visibly shaken but physically unharmed.
Jennifer Carvajal behind the wheel in April 2021, speeding down I-4 at 110 miles an hour, losing control and going airborne before crashing into a car dealership.
Her 22-year-old cousin, who had been in the passenger seat, wasn't as lucky. He was pronounced dead at the scene. At first glance, it seemed like a horrific accident caused by reckless driving. But as details emerged, the public learned this crash wasn't just a random tragedy.
And said goodbye to this 22-year-old Tampa man today. He was a passenger in this crash last weekend. Troopers say the woman behind the wheel was his cousin.
It was the product of repeated failures across Florida's criminal justice system, probation oversight, and court intervention protocols. Jennifer Carvajal was no stranger to the legal system. In fact, she should not have been behind the wheel that night at all. She was a repeat offender with multiple prior DUIs, probation violations.
Jennifer Carvajal, and she was already on probation for another deadly DUI crash.
And a criminal history stretching back to her teenage years. Yet time and time again, the system failed to hold her fully accountable, allowing her continued access to vehicles, alcohol, and freedom she repeatedly abused. Jennifer's troubled past was well documented. Her first arrest for DUI came at just 16 years old.
Carvajal served time in prison for driving drunk, running a red light, and crashing into a plant-sitting man, killing him back in 2014.
Despite her age, the severity of the crash, which involved injuries, led prosecutors to pursue adult charges. She was placed on probation, ordered to attend alcohol education programs, and prohibited from operating a vehicle without special permission.
She was out on probation when prosecutors say she was involved in this latest fatal crash.
But Jennifer violated her probation multiple times over the following years. Missed counseling sessions, failed drug and alcohol screenings, and unauthorized driving incidents became common.
It's almost as if instead of taking every step to avoid putting yourself in that situation again, you took affirmative steps to ensure that it happened.
Each time, judges issued warnings. Occasionally, short jail stints followed, but nothing ever permanently restricted her access to driving. By 2020, Jennifer had accumulated multiple probation violations, yet court records show her supervised release was repeatedly extended rather than revoked. Overworked probation officers juggling heavy caseloads.
So Ms. Carvajal, on the one count of DUI manslaughter that still did not have a bond on it, I'm going to grant the state's motion for pretrial detention and hold you without bond on that one count.
Documented each infraction, but rarely recommended full revocation, partly due to systemic pressures emphasizing rehabilitation over incarceration for non-violent offenders.
When the officer approached Carvajal, who was standing by a chain-link fence, she denied being the driver or even having any involvement in the crash.
Her family, too, struggled to intervene. Jennifer's relatives repeatedly raised concerns with probation officers and counselors, warning that her drinking was escalating, but no significant interventions occurred. This revolving door approach.
Prosecutors portrayed Jennifer Carvajal as a danger to the community who cared more about staying out of prison than about the people in her car.
A combination of leniency, systemic resource strain, and bureaucratic inertia allowed Jennifer to remain on the streets, legally prohibited from driving, but with access to vehicles and alcohol nearly unchecked. On the night of the fatal crash, Jennifer had been drinking at a family gathering before choosing to drive.
Documents reveal the trio were headed home after attending a birthday party for Carvajal's grandfather, who turned 80. After the crash, the female passenger crawled out of the car.
Witnesses later told investigators that relatives begged her not to get behind the wheel, but their warnings went ignored. Toxicology reports following the crash confirmed Jennifer's blood alcohol content was well over twice Florida's legal limit.
Her blood alcohol level, nearly twice the legal limit.
So the entire room smelled like alcohol?
Yes. It smelled like a brewery.
Body cam footage from responding officers captured Jennifer sobbing at the scene, alternating between denial and remorse as the weight of her actions sank in. Public outrage exploded as details of her extensive criminal history were released.
It's been devastating for me and my family to think about what it would be like to still have him here.
News outlets aired timelines showing years of repeated probation violations, court appearances, and lenient judicial decisions. Talk shows and true crime podcasts seized on the case as emblematic of Florida's broader failures in addressing repeat DUI offenders.
Today, she was back in court, and Fox 13's Gloria Gomez shows us what the judge decided to do.
The family of Jennifer's cousin demanded answers. How could someone with such a long, documented history of dangerous behavior still be free to cause more harm? Their grief transformed into public advocacy, calling for sweeping reforms in probation oversight and DUI sentencing standards.
The constant void that will always be there because of selfish acts that Jennifer decided to do. It is something that we live with and live through every single day.
Advocacy groups argued that Jennifer's case was far from unique. Across Florida and the U.S., probation departments faced overwhelming caseloads, limited resources, and pressure to prioritize rehabilitation over incarceration, even for individuals showing clear patterns of escalating behavior.
I advise your client.
In court Monday, the judge reminded Carvajal that 1 week ago he had set bond amounts on the lesser charges, but no bond on the violation of probation charge.
The judicial review that followed Jennifer's final arrest exposed glaring weaknesses in probation monitoring protocols. Judges admitted in internal reviews that resource shortages often left them reluctant to revoke probation outright, fearing long-term incarceration would do more harm than good for young offenders.
A judge handed down Jennifer Carvajal's sentence this morning. Now, this is the second time she'll go to prison for a deadly DUI accident.
Probation officers acknowledged systemic gaps in coordination with law enforcement, treatment providers, and families. Electronic monitoring was rarely used, even for high-risk individuals with repeated violations. Counseling services lacked consistent funding, resulting in missed intervention opportunities.
We lived through it with our family gatherings. We lived through it through holidays. We lived through it through birthdays and anniversaries. Where Pedro is now empty.
In the wake of the tragedy, Florida lawmakers introduced new legislation aimed at tightening restrictions on repeat DUI offenders. Proposed reforms included mandatory ignition interlock devices for all DUI convictions, increased funding for intensive probation monitoring units, and broader judicial authority to mandate inpatient treatment for chronic offenders showing persistent noncompliance. For Jennifer, the consequences finally caught up.
Well, at times, Jennifer Carvajal was head down in tears today, listening to witnesses and testimony from family members of those injured and killed.
She was charged with DUI manslaughter, vehicular homicide, and probation violation. Facing overwhelming evidence, she accepted a plea deal, resulting in a 20-year prison sentence.
Well, the driver in a DUI crash that killed her cousin will spend 67 years in prison.
At her sentencing hearing, Jennifer tearfully apologized to her family and the victim's relatives. "I can't take back what I've done. I've destroyed my own life and taken someone else's. I only hope someday you can find peace."
Later, Carvajal herself took the stand through tears, apologizing.
And no matter how many sorries I say to each of you, or even him, I could never forgive myself.
But for the victim's family, peace remained elusive. Their son was gone, not because of a single reckless decision, but because of years of systemic failures that enabled Jennifer's downward spiral.
She has now committed 2 acts of DUI and taken 2 people's lives while doing it.
So the judge sentenced Carvajal to about 67 years in prison.
The Jennifer Carvajal case remains a haunting example of how well-intentioned systems designed to offer second chances can collapse under the weight of repeated non-compliance, bureaucratic overload, and institutional reluctance to act decisively. This is Vaulted Crimes, real stories, real consequences.